Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. My name is Renee Angela Mock. I'm the operations manager here at Mentor Maryland, DC. We are your regional affiliate of the National Mentoring Partnership, here to help close the mentoring gap across Maryland and DC and ensure that you, the mentoring programs, have everything you need to do your best work as mentoring programs and youth development programs here in Maryland and DC, and we are glad to have great representation across Maryland and DC. So part of that is to hold our free professional development calendar here for you, and today I am glad to have Samuel Bellamy here to facilitate a session about funding, something I know that you all have concerns about throughout the year and a gap for knowledge about. So we are excited to have this session for you, to be able to record it, and for it to be an evergreen session and really important one for any time of the year, but especially for right now. So I'm going to hand it over to Sam. Myself and some of my Mentor Maryland DC colleagues are on the call. Should you need anything from us, you can send us a message, and we are always here for you as well. So we'll be sending all the follow-up for this as well, the PDF, the recording once it's on our YouTube channel, and Sam's information as well. And if you enjoyed having Sam today, when we send out our feedback survey, let us know if we need to bring Sam back for another session. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam and let him take it away as our expert today.
All right. Thank you, Renee. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for joining us on a Thursday afternoon. I know we're probably all dragging to the end of the week, and it's 4:30. So we're dealing with kids and family life and all kinds of other stuff. So I do appreciate you guys for joining us. Wish I could see more faces, but listen, I'm not going to be that guy. If you need to have your camera off, that's completely fine. As long as you're able to participate, that's okay with me. So I do want to get started with just saying, listen, again, welcome. This session is one that we presented in January at the National Summit. And I'm pleased to be able to present it for you guys this afternoon, 5 ways to diversify funding. See here. Before we get started, I always like to give this disclaimer. Let's all read it together silently while I read aloud. This is not legal advice. I am not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. I am not a tax attorney. Let's say it one more time. This is not legal advice. I am not an accountant. I am not a lawyer. I am not a tax attorney. Can I get someone to come off mute and give me one thing that I am not?
A tax attorney.
Tax attorney. Somebody else, please.
A lawyer.
A lawyer. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Somebody else.
You're not giving legal advice.
I am not giving legal advice. Thank you, Mr. Walker. One more. I think there's one more. I feel like I heard 3.
You're not an accountant.
Not an accountant. Thank you, sir. So now that we've gotten that out the way, let me share actually who I am. So my name is Samuel. I've been in the nonprofit space for about 12 years, on the consultant side for about a little over 5 years now. I do provide technical assistance and training through Mentor Maryland, DC, as well as in my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina. I like to say that's my 5 to 9, right? My 9 to 5, I am a program officer with the Coastal Community Foundation here in Charleston, South Carolina. I manage about 9 portfolio programs where we provide funding, of course, as well as grant management support in the 9. So I do feel like I have a perspective and value to add, even though I am not a lawyer, an accountant, an attorney, and all those other things. So before we get started, I would love to know who is in the room. So this is the opportunity for you guys to get out your phones. If you will scan the QR code, let's find out who is in the room. And I'm going to stop sharing for a second just so that I can pull up the results and we can see it real time, just so we can find out who, what role everybody is playing in their respective areas. Let's see here. Let's pull this back up. Oh no, that's not it. Hold on. Let's see. There we go. Let's do that. And okay, there we go. All right, so if you were not able to scan the QR code, I think I saw someone in the chat say that they didn't have their phone. You can go to www.menti.com and you can type in the code 5612-8710, and it will prompt you to answer this one question: who is in the room? We'd love to know what position you're currently holding. That way we know what perspective you're coming from. Thank you, Andrew, for putting that in the chat. I feel like maybe I should have had some Jeopardy music or something. We'll work on that for next time. All right, so we see a couple of executive directors, some program directors, managers, one mentor. Okay. Can I get the code, please? Miss Norty, were you able to get the code, the 5612-8710?
Why does he look like that?
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
All right, a couple board members. Give a shout out for our board members for being in the room. You don't find that too often. Congratulations, board members. Thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Mentors. Okay. I think we have a pretty good handle. So we have mostly executive directors, program directors, managers, a couple of mentors, volunteer, and a couple of board members. Wonderful. Stop sharing that and go back to our screen. Thank you guys for participating in that. And let's go back to our share. Okay. So thank you guys so much for participating in that. You know, it's really important to know who's in the room. That way, you know, if we need to tailor any of the information that we're sharing or anything like that, I want to make sure that it's presented in a way that is actionable for you to either act on yourself or to be able to take back to your prospective organizations and share the information. So let's get started. So we all know the importance of diversifying revenue. You know, there are really three main reasons why you would need to do so. The first is really just scarcity. You know, these days, the environment is unpredictable. We have more and more individuals starting nonprofits, which means there's more and more individuals vying for what would be considered limited resources. When you look at things like the recession and COVID-19, we really saw some of our go-to resources really dry up. And it kind of left some organizations in a scramble to figure out what to do. And many of us were not prepared for that. So diversifying your revenue is definitely something that helps out in the event that that ever happens again. The second thing is the political climate. I mean, I think it's a foregone conclusion that sometimes funding flows towards the areas of whoever's in office. This could be locally or nationally. I think we saw recently where, there was a change in office, and all of a sudden funding priorities changed with it. Sometimes if your organization is relying heavily on those funding sources, and you see a change like that in leadership, again, sometimes it's hard to bounce back from something like that. So that is something that we're also aware of. And lastly, I do want to lift up, some of the systemic inequities. It's no secret that for a variety of reasons, I mean, grassroots organizations, organizations led primarily by individuals of color, especially women and Latino, Latinx, they just don't receive the funding that maybe traditional organizations led by non-persons of color would get. And we can insert whatever reasons that you want to, but we know what happens, and we know it's something that needs to change. So this is one way that we can also work on that as well. So those are like the three main reasons that I can think of that you would want to diversify your revenue and your income for your organization. They're not the only reasons, but I think if you were to boil down many of the reasons that people give, it probably falls into one of those three categories. So today we're going to talk about five different types, right? I really have 6 up there, but it's lumped into 5. So we're going to talk about 5 different ways that you and your organization, particularly your board and your executive director, 5 different ways that you guys can look into adding to your portfolio mix to diversify your income, to make sure that you're more sustainable for a long term. The ideal ratio, right? You might have like 1/3 grant, 1/3 individual giving, 1/3, earned income or something. The idea is that you create that even mix so that even if one of your main sources of income diminishes, it doesn't derail the whole program. The last thing that you'd want to happen is for some, a change in office, another pandemic or anything like that come up, and then all of a sudden you have to lay off staff because you weren't prepared or you didn't have another way to replace a source of income that you had. So we're going to talk about a couple of different ways that you can do that today. Before I get into it, I do want to let you know that the next couple of slides after this, they're broken down by I don't want to say access, but let's say they're broken down by cycles. We feel like there are a number of different cycles that a nonprofit organization is going to go through. Author Judith Simon, she wrote a book called The 5 Life Stages of a Nonprofit Organization, and she categorized the nonprofits this way. A grassroots organization is that one that maybe just started, you're in year 1, maybe up to year 5. Most of the resources that you get are going to be out of your own pocket or in kind or through, close family members and friends, right? That's where a lot of the income will come if you're a grassroots organization. Tori, yes, this recording will be sent out to everyone. Then you have this incubation period where organizations that have been around for at least 3 to 5 years, they're no longer going in their own pocket to fund things. They might have some small grants, maybe a couple of Walmart grants or some department store grants. They're getting resources on a regular basis, but they're still not putting together the type of resources that will allow them to maybe hire staff or hire some more experienced help, or even hire and gather the resources on the back end that would help make things a lot easier, like an accountant or anything like that. So those are the incubation periods, that 3 to 5 year. Then you have the nonprofit that's in the growing category. The growing stage is 3 to 7 years. These organizations, they have a couple of key relationships with funders. They are starting to think about long-term sustainability. They're becoming more efficient with the resources that they do have. They might have a signature fundraiser that does very well for them, that they continue to run and that the community is starting to notice them for. And then you have your mature organization. That's anywhere from 7 years plus. You've been around the block for a while. You have a reliable, diverse stream of income. You probably have some savings. You probably have a small staff, small to medium staff. And somewhere or another, you probably have some sort of major gifts program. And we'll talk about major gifts program a little bit later. So those are all the stages, right, of a nonprofit organization. Now, the one thing that you might notice is that it says 5 stages and you only see 4 up there. You only see 4 because at the very beginning, even before grassroots, you have this period where your paperwork is done, but you don't know what to do, right? I think we've all been there, where we have our logo, we have our name, we know who we want to serve, but we don't yet have a fully fleshed out organization. So it's just that waiting period, right? You might also notice that the years overlap. So we have grassroots organizations that go from 1 to 5, incubation period from 3 to 5, the growing from 3 to 7, and then mature 7 plus. That's actually on purpose, because sometimes you can fluctuate between that incubation period where you're gathering some resources, you have a good handle on what you want to do 1 year, and then funding priorities change, and then you're back to becoming a grassroots organization, where now you're back at, building resources from in-kind support. Maybe one of your main funders has backed off or has changed their funding priorities, leaving you to kind of regroup. So you'll fluctuate from stage to stage, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. You'll actually see that happens more often than not. And it's really when you get into the mature organization, when you're 7 years plus and you really have a good handle on everything that you're trying to do, where you feel like you're stable. So that means from year 1 to year 6, it's a little rocky, right? It's a little rocky. And I'm here to tell you that that's okay, right? That there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, as long as you're making progress. Progress is really the thing that's going to let you know where you're at, is if you're making progress, if you're gaining those relationships, if you're gaining those tools that will help you handle your back office. And you could be in year 6 still trying to figure that out. You can still be considered a grassroots organization even though you're in year 10, right? There's this saying that says you can do 20 years in the business, or you can do the same 1 year 20 times, because you never really put the pieces together to move yourself forward. So just take that into consideration. So as we go through the next couple of slides, you'll see at the top where it says this is the stage that, or this is a stream of income that's best suited for a grassroots organization, or best suited for a growing organization or a mature organization. So I just want you to be aware of that as we go through. Okay. So let's talk about individual giving. Now, individual giving, for the most part, just is considered, one-time donations. These are the very first type of donations that an organization will ever receive, whether it's friends and family, whether it's coworkers. Everyone will more than likely have a collection of people who have donated at least once, right? And then you'll have your recurring donations. That really just refers to any person who donates more than once, and on a consistent basis. So if you think about individuals who say, I want to give you a $10 donation every single month, right? That would be considered a recurring donation, right? So sometimes when funding sources, they're not well matched, oftentimes they don't necessarily flow in the way that they need to flow. And one-time donations and recurring donations, those are the things that really kind of help organizations stay afloat, right? So what I want to do is share with you this one fact, because I feel like sometimes we don't give our individual donors enough credit, maybe enough respect, maybe we don't pay enough attention to our individual donors the way we should, because we're thinking beyond them, right? We're thinking about the big grants, we're thinking about the federal grants, we're thinking about the next thing. But I want to share that, according to Giving USA, 70% of all money raised from nonprofit organizations come from individual donors, right? Individual donors. Now, for a lot of us, individual donors might just literally look like family and friends, but there's another segment of individual donors that requires us to do a little research. It requires us to meet individuals that we may not have had a previous relationship with. It requires us to steward the relationship so that individual giving can increase. One of the things that helps us do that is the CRM software. So this stands for Customer Relationship Management. Many of us, especially in the grassroots area, we might be using an Excel spreadsheet. That Excel spreadsheet might just have, the name, the amount of money that an individual donated. It may have, the date that they donated. Let me see, help me out. What else might you collect on an Excel spreadsheet about a particular donor? You can just drop it in the chat. It might have a phone number. It might have an email address, and that's really about it, right? Yeah, right, Andrew. Just an address, if that. You may have an address, right? Because if a person, if you were at an event and someone came up to you and said, "Hey, I would like to donate," you might have a way to take that donation on the spot, but they might give you cash. They might just write you a check. You might receive that any kind of way. Yes, the amount of the donation. And we collect these spreadsheets where we have this information on it, but if we're being honest with ourselves, they collect us. We never go back to them. We never look at them again. So one of the things that we encourage people to do is to invest in a CRM software. Now, the 4 that I have up here, Springly, Nutshell, Nonprofit Easy, Bloomerang, these are just the 4 that I chose. There are probably hundreds of different CRM softwares out there that you can use. I like these in particular because they're little to no money. Springly is actually free to use. It allows you to manage your organization from A to Z. It doesn't require a lot of tech skill. So for our people who are not that tech savvy, Springly is a great resource for you to use and incorporate in your development because it doesn't take a lot to do. So a volunteer can do it. You don't have to have a lot of technical skill to be able to use that. I also like Nutshell because Nutshell only costs $20 a month. Now, if we're talking about a grassroots organization, $20 a month, might feel like a stretch, but we gotta do what we have to do. I see a hand, and I don't want to butcher your name. So if you can come off mute and then give me the pronunciation of your name so that I can acknowledge you correctly, and then ask your question.
Yes, my name is Zainab.
Zainab.
Yes.
Okay.
I just have a quick question about the CRMs. How easy are they to migrate from one CRM to another? Say, for instance, if I start with Springly
Mhm.
and then I wanted to migrate to Nonprofit Easy, how easy is it to migrate from one to the other?
Yeah, great question. So it's going to vary platform to platform. Some platforms will allow you to transfer your contacts easily. Some will allow you to transfer them up until a certain point, and then they will charge you for each additional contact afterwards, depending on the platform that you switch to. Most are relatively easy, but it really just depends on what you're coming from. If you're coming from something like Razor's Edge to Springly, Razor's Edge it's much more complex, much more in depth, and that might not transfer very well. But if you're going from Springly to Boomerang, that's an easy transition to make. So it really just depends. I mean, a long answer to say it depends on the system, but most are relatively easy. Like for most of them, it's easy to transfer contacts. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody else has any questions along the way, you can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat. I'm pretty informal, you don't have to worry about interrupting me or anything like that. I want to make sure that you get the information while we're on the slide that you need it on, so you don't have to wait. So just jump in there. So these are the platforms that I suggest. Bloomerang is actually my favorite. They are a little bit more pricey with $100 a month, but they have more features. The best feature that I feel like an organization would need would be the auto receipts and emails feature. Meaning anytime somebody donates to your organization, a receipt is automatically generated and an email is automatically generated. Because when we think about what it takes to actually acquire a donor, the research says that organizations lose 50% of their donors every single year because of lack of contact, right? So let's say if you only have 100 donors and half of them you're going to lose, meaning they're not going to donate to you next year because they didn't hear from you again, right? So having something that's automated, it automatically sends an email to them, sending a receipt saying, thank you for your donation. It automatically tracks. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, especially if you're a smaller shop with less hands, right? So something like that might be more beneficial than maybe something like Springly that may not have all of those additional features. So you really have to take a look at all the features and see what your organization needs and can use the most, and then go with that. And I would say that regardless of cost, right? Cheap help is expensive, and good help is expensive. So it really just depends on which one you actually want, right? So all of these different platforms will allow you to keep in touch with your donor. And when we talk about donors, I mentioned that 50% of donors don't donate again because of the lack of contact. Part of stewarding a donor includes letting them know what their gift, we call the donations gifts. So it's letting them know what the gift was for, what it was used for, how it's being impactful, sending thank you notes. If a individual is committing to $10 a month this year, having a software like this reminds you to say, hey, next year, this is their anniversary of their first gift. So they may have started out giving $10 a month, but if you've been keeping in touch with them throughout the year, now might be a good time to go back to them and say, hey, I know you were giving $10 a month last year. How about giving $20 a month this year? You know, you've seen our work, you've been invested, you're a volunteer, you get our newsletter, all of those things. Software like this helps you keep track of that information. I also realize that sometimes you just don't have time. You don't have time to remember every conversation. You don't know where you met everybody. You don't know what nuanced drink a potential donor might like. You might not realize that they love animals and they have a dog named Fluffy. Like, you might not remember some of those details, but having that information in a CRM software versus an Excel spreadsheet allows you to pull that information up really, really quickly. Not only that, this also allows you to share this information with your board members, and your board members can make phone calls. And you can just type in little notes that says, hey, you know, Dayon gave us $10 a month last year. We want to increase, see if we can move Dayon from $10 to $15. And oh, by the way, Dayon loves the color red. His wife is from, you know, Baltimore, and he has a 5-year-old daughter. You know, these little tidbits of information helps to narrow that relationship gap with Dayon. So whenever you call Dayon, you say, hey, Dayon, how's your daughter? Right now, Dayon might think, man, I can't believe this person remembers this small detail about my life, but it's the CRM software. Yes, Dayon, you look like you would like red. You look like you would like red. So CRM software, you know, those are the things that make a lot of this a lot easier. You know, again, telling them how important their donation was, letting them know how much you appreciate it, and really just keeping in touch with them and making sure that they feel a part of the organization that they're actually donating to, right? So these are a couple examples of individual giving. So we have direct asks, meaning you see somebody who you might know, who might be familiar with your program, and you say, hey, would you consider supporting my organization? You also have reoccurring gifts, which look like, you know, would you mind committing $10 a month for a whole year in order to support this organization? Then you have appeal letters and newsletters. I feel like everybody has a newsletter of some sort. If you don't have a newsletter, I do suggest that you create a newsletter, but on that newsletter, have a donate button, right? Every opportunity that you have, every contact that you have with the donor, you want to have some sort of, you know, call to action or a way that a person can get money to you, right? And when we think of appeal letters, for some of our organizations, you know, appeal letters is going to just be too costly. We're talking about, you know, stamps and envelopes and all that kind of stuff. But for some of our organizations that might work with seniors, we have to think about the population that we're serving. There are seniors out here who still enjoy receiving mail. So for those individuals, you might do well sending an appeal letter or some sort of correspondence in the snail mail system, right? Then you have things like online giving. So that's like your Giving Tuesday. If you're unfamiliar with Black Philanthropy Month, that happens every August. It's like Giving Tuesday, but it's specifically for African American and indigenous, you know, POC, whatever the term is that you want to use. Is specifically a time of year where we highlight the contributions of African Americans to the space and philanthropy. So giving, you know, it's like our Giving Tuesday essentially. Then we have peer-to-peer giving. Most peer-to-peer giving, thank you, Zainab. Most peer-to-peer giving is, you know, you think GoFundMe, but there are other platforms out there that also allow you to do peer-to-peer giving, crowd raising, you know, those type of platforms that exist. All of those are examples of individual givings, okay? So next we want to talk about corporate and foundation grants, all right? Corporate and foundation grants. Now, these are the things that most people are most familiar with. You know, it's like whenever you first start your nonprofit, you know, no one considers, you know, how they're going to raise money or anything like that. They just say, oh, I'm going to write a grant. And they think that's going to solve all of their problems. Sometimes it does. 9 times out of 10, it does not. Grants aren't the holy grail. Grants aren't the end all be all. Grants won't help you start a nonprofit from the ground up. Some grants out there won't help you with your operating capital. Times are changing though. The times are changing, especially with our community foundation. We actually will fund general operating support. But it's still a slow turning process. There are still a lot of organizations out there that are very old school when it comes to that. They still want to know how many pennies of the dollar is going to the exact program. They still have that mentality. It is changing a bit, but it is still out there. In 2018, I want to give you this stat. 2018, giving was over $400 billion, right? Just think about that. 2018, charitable giving was up to $400 billion. Now, foundation grants, corporation grants, grants in general only accounted for 16% of that, right? Just let that sink in. Out of $400 billion, only 16% of that came from foundation grants. So it lets you know that although foundation grants exist, most organizations aren't staying afloat because of foundation grants or because of grants in general, right? So that gives you something to think about, especially if you don't have a robust way to engage individual givers. And if you don't have, some of these other streams that we'll talk about a little bit later, again, we think grants, but grants really only account for 16% of that 400 billion. So, it's other places, right? So the most common grants that you're going to see is going to be the foundation grant support. So that's private foundation, family foundations, and then community foundations. You will see these in a variety of different places, actually. They come in a variety of different ways. So there's project grant support. There is capacity building grant support. Capacity building means like training for the leader, for the executive director, that capacity building grant. You might find a research grant out there. You might find in-kind grants, right? So those are like your Walmart grants, your grocery store grants. Like if you're having an event and someone says, oh, I need water, or I need, something for giveaways and something like that. So that's where a lot of those grants come in. And I'll actually talk about corporate grants a little bit later, but I do want to point out most companies have a website dedicated to grants. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, right? These are some places where you can find most of your foundation and grants, right? So first there's Candid. Candid is now, I believe, what is Candid? GuideStar. GuideStar, it used to be GuideStar, it's now Candid. But there's a foundation directory on Candid. You can search by the foundation's name, or you can search by state. You can also search by their 990s if you know the organization's name, or if you know the organization's EIN number. So let's say you're in Maryland, and you can go on Candid's website and you can look for foundations in Maryland, and it will give you a list of every foundation that's in Maryland right now, right? I mentioned my state library in South Carolina, but your library, right? Any library that you have, they are a wealth of knowledge. I know we don't go to libraries like that anymore, but libraries are still the #1 place to go for free information. Our state library here has a directory of community, private, and family foundation grants. They also have proposal writing classes. They have free grant research workshops. Our state library is pretty amazing when it comes to that. Most of those resources are free, especially if you have a library card. Most of them are free. So I encourage you all to look in your state library or your county library and see what kind of resources they have available for you. There's also a company out there called Instrumental. It's spelled out just like that. Instrumental allows you to do a couple of things that are really, really unique to them. You can search for a specific grant. So let's say you heard of an organization that looks just like yours, that does the same type of work as yours, that received a grant from a funder, and you want to know what that grant was. You want to know what it was about and how you can qualify for it. Well, Instrumental can allow you to search for that specific grant. Instrumental also offers free courses, ebooks, guides, grant writing classes. Instrumental really is like a one-stop shop for grant research. I mean, it really is I think it's an excellent tool. I will say it does cost money. It's not cheap, but this is where I always encourage organizations to do some of that collaboration stuff that we talk about so much, but we don't really do that well, right? I would recommend, this is just me, I would recommend you and a couple of other leaders from other organizations go in together and get a subscription to Instrumental, and it will allow you to pull up to, I think it's like 50 grants at a time or something like that. And when I say 50 grants, I just mean you can research and pull the information for up to, I think, 50 grants at a time. Now, one organization might not need 50 grants, but if you're going in on another organization and you guys are sharing the login, you can save some money that way. You're not sharing any private information because you don't apply for the grants on Instrumental. This is just where you find them. This is just where you search for them, where you pull that information out. It also gives you access to all the grant writing classes and all the free courses and all the ebooks and all the guides. You can download it as many times as you want. Joyce Walker, yes, there is a 14-day trial. Try it out. But again, this is where you guys can practice some of that organization to organization collaboration, right? Talk to someone you know, talk to someone you trust, say, hey, you're looking for grants, I'm looking for grants, I know of a resource that costs a little bit of money. I forgot the amount of money that it costs, but because I'm saying that, it was a pretty penny, right? I think it's over a couple of $100 just to get a subscription for that. But this is, again, it's an opportunity for you guys to work together, and you guys can share that information, right? You can share that information. The last one is called Grantscape. Again, it offers links to federal, state, local, and foundation grant sources. It also gives you funder profiles. Funder profiles is really, really important because you need to know what the funder prioritizes. Every funder out there has their own giving priorities, right? And before you write a grant to, responding to an RFP, which is a request for proposal, before you do any of those things, it helps if you have more information about that particular funder, meaning what area of the country do they fund? What are their funding priorities this year? Because the same way we talked about some of the funding priorities changing for office and people in office and things like that, the same holds true for foundations. Their funding priorities change. So it's a great opportunity for you to find out what that funder is actually interested in. And if your organization is somebody that they would be interested in funding. I see somebody, Anthony, put something in the chat. I can't see it, Anthony, because it's real small. But if you'll write the number in the chat, that would be really helpful because I can't see it. So yeah, I encourage you guys all to look into that because again, it helps, right? All the information, the more information you have, the better equipped you are to actually apply for pricing structure for Instrumental. Okay, thank you, sir. It's all the more information that you have at your disposal that can help you make just better decisions when it comes to what grants you want to search for, what grants you want to apply to, and more importantly, where you can find your potential next grant or your next resource. They also have a knowledge center, and the knowledge center is similar to grant writing classes, is similar to grant workshops. It's really letting you know tips and tricks and tools of the trade that will help you increase your funding for your organization. And I believe it's free. So check out Grantscape as well. All right. Any questions before I go on to this next page? No, we're all good. Okay. So on the first page, when we talked about corporate grants, I mentioned that every organization, every company has some sort of corporate social responsibility page. This page actually is from Target. So I just want to show you how you would go about looking for potential grants from a business or from a corporation. So when you go to corporate.target.com or the Target website, you want to scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll see this first square right here where it says news and features, sustainability and ESG and press. You would click on sustainability and ESG, and then you would scroll to the bottom of that page, and then it has this wonderful little thing down here that says, are you looking for Target grants? When you click on this button, are you looking for Target grants? It pulls up this page on this side. And there's a couple pieces of information that is really, really helpful for me if I was looking to receive a grant from Target. The first thing that I'm seeing is that in 2020, 94% of their giving reached local communities and programs, which lets me know that they're not all about corporate giving per se, and they care about the small communities that they're in. It also tells you, big and bold, 240 million was given, 231 million of that came from local communities and programs. So the first thing I would think of is, how do they describe local communities and programs? So they have a couple of different pages. So they have a corporate citizenship grant program, and it gives you all that information here. But then right under that, it says the Target Foundation grant program, and it mentions hometown. So that's kind of the investigative work that I would do to find out what sort of grants that particular business offers. And again, I promise you, every business has some sort of website out here, whether they're offering actual grants or whether they're offering just in-kind support, they're doing something. And a lot of it is, again, it's described as corporate social responsibility. And the reason why they do that is because once upon a time, there were some organizations that weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And they really they received a lot of backlash in the public. And to kind of squelch some of that backlash, they said, oh, well, we need to invest in the community. And once they started investing in the community, the consumers, you and I, we started saying, you know what? We really appreciate companies that invest back in the community. Let's go shop with them some more. So now every corporation out there is like, ooh, how can we give money to the community to encourage people to come spend money back with us? So it's a give and take. Some organizations are on the up and up and they really care about the community. Some are looking for tax write-offs. For me, it doesn't matter either way. I'm going to get this grant money if I need it for my organization, right? That's the goal. So I encourage you to look at, again, corporate grants as well as foundation grants, okay? But there's also this other little thing called volunteer grants. Now, a lot of people don't talk about this very often, but there are some organizations out there who say, you know what, we're going to go above and beyond just the regular community home grants, the regular, hot dog donations. We want to do a little bit more. We want people to really know that we care about the community, so much so that we're going to pay organizations a portion of the money that our staff would be paid to volunteer. So if you look at this page, you see ExxonMobil will pay $500 for every 20 hours to a max up to $2,000. So let's think about this for instance. $500 for every 20 hours for their employees to volunteer with your organization. So if you have anyone working for any one of these companies, and this isn't an exhaustive list, this is just a quick list of a couple of organizations that have it. Simple Google search, Tracy, but again, we will send this slide to you so you'll have it. But the company, they have that information. Most of it is on their websites as well. They have that information. So what they're trying to do is encourage their employees to get involved in the community. So you might say, how does this help me? Well, we all have organizations where we need volunteers. We need volunteers to work as to operate as mentors. We need volunteers to help staff our days. We might need volunteers to help provide transportation. More importantly, we all need board members. So I can use this as a way to essentially get paid twice. You know, if this is an employee, if this is a volunteer, if this is a board member, I can encourage that board member to say, hey, I know you're working with us, you're volunteering with us, but I also know that you happen to work at Verizon. And I know Verizon has a volunteer program where they pay $750 for every 50 hours. You know, that if you only have one board member, that's $750. But let's say you went to a Verizon call center and you said, hey, we would love for our Verizon employees to come staff one of our fundraising events. Now you might have 20 to 30 Verizon volunteers out there. And let's say you happen to keep in touch with all those volunteers and you encourage them to keep coming back and keep working with your organization because you have a CRM. So you're able to keep track of everybody who's volunteered or who's donated or has had contact with your organization. Now you can encourage them to do more and more. And again, this is money that is essentially free for you. All you have to do is manage the relationship. So there are a lot of organizations out there that have grant programs like this. These are called volunteer grants. And again, every organization is going to have its own qualifications. And as you can see, it's differing amounts for each organization. But I encourage you to, again, there's so much information on companies' websites. They're not hiding the information. You just have to look for it a little bit. But it's not, it's not a secret. It's not anything that you got to have a secret password for or anything like that. This is public information, but it's there. And a lot of times we don't take advantage of it. And it's not because we don't want to, but if we're being honest, most of us we're so busy working in our organization that we don't have a chance to work on our organization, right? We're wearing 5 or 6 different hats. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all started somewhere, but we want to get to the point where we do have enough resources coming in to where we can hire help so that we can do some of these other things that will allow us to scale and ultimately have more impact in the community. That's the goal, right? So volunteer grants is another something that you'd want to look into that I encourage you guys all to check out, right? So you have corporate and foundation grant examples. You have matching gifts, you have volunteer grants, corporate social responsibility, you have those in-kind grants, then you have foundation stuff, you have your project grants and your capacity building grants and things of that nature. So before I move past grants, are there any questions that I could answer for anyone before we move on to the next slide? Nope, we're good. All right. So now let's talk about earned revenue. So earned revenue is exactly what it sounds like. It's earned income that is taxable that you either get from working for someone else, working for yourself, or a business or something that you own. Well, earned income, I'm sorry, is taxable income that you get from working for someone else, yourself, or a business. For a nonprofit organization, it means any income that's not donated, right? There are a couple of things that you want to look into whenever you're talking about earned income. Is it legal? Because for some odd reason, when we all got into this work, everyone told us that a nonprofit is not supposed to make money, which is the biggest lie that anybody has ever shared with the community. It's not that you can't make money, it's that that can't be your sole purpose of starting a nonprofit. So I'm going to encourage you guys to don't let your heart get so big that it shrinks your wallet. Because as you know, it takes money to run an organization. It takes money to bring in staff. It takes money to get the technology. It takes money to deliver programming. So don't let anybody convince you that a nonprofit isn't supposed to make money. You are allowed to make as much money as you want to make. We're just saying that that can't be your sole purpose for existing. So is earned revenue legal? Yes, but it does have its limitations. There is what's called the 20% rule, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And there's also what's called unrelated business income, which again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, like right now. So what to watch out for when you're talking about earned income? So the first is the UBI, unrelated business income. So this is it's a tax on income that comes from any activity that's carried out in your organization that's not related to your mission. So let's say you are running a nonprofit organization geared towards, I don't know, let's say turtles or something. Let's say you're running an organization about, saving turtles, but you have a business that fixes guitars, and the majority of your money that you get from fixing guitars goes back into your organization. The IRS is going to look at that and say, oh, wait a minute. When you filled out this IRS paperwork, you said you were working with turtles, for turtles, and all about turtles, but you have a guitar business that funds half your business. That's unrelated business income, and they will tax you on every dollar that's donated to your organization from that business, right? That's unrelated business income. The 20% thing that we were talking about on this slide, the 20% rule, a rule of thumb is if you're going to engage in earned income activities, make sure that it doesn't account for more than 20% of your budget, right? No more than 20% of your budget, because any more than 20%, it's not that, it's illegal, it's that now you have the IRS asking questions. Now, I am from the state of mind, in my former years and in my former day before, doing any type of charitable work in the nonprofit industry, I've had my run-ins with the IRS. They are not nice people. My goal is to stay away from the IRS at all costs. So I encourage you to keep your earned income revenue under 20% of your total budget. Even if it's on the up and up, you just don't want questions. You don't want any audits. Audits are expensive. So if you can stay away from that, that would be an ideal situation. Again, not illegal, but it's something that I would stay away from. But I'm also not a tax attorney. So you take that information with a grain of salt and talk to your tax attorney to make sure that they're giving you advice that's tailored and specific to your organization. Also, before you engage into earned income strategies or anything like that, is your board and staff engaged, right? Some organizations, when they first start, they just simply say, you know what, we're going to rely on government contracts and grant proposals to make this work, right? That might be all they're used to. That might be all they want to do, right? So before you think about engaging in an earned income strategy, make sure your board and your staff is on board and engaged, especially your staff. Because when we talk about time, one thing you want to consider is, does your staff have the capacity to run an additional program on top of the activities that your organization is already set out to do without losing the quality of your services, right? So if you're mentoring and you're doing all of the things that you're doing, your after school programs and all of this kind of stuff, can you also run a side business without leaving the kids hanging, right? Do you have the time? Do you have the capacity to run a full-fledged business while also meeting the needs of the young people and the families that you serve? If the answer is no, earned income might not be for you right now. But it's a question that you would have to ask yourself. Do we have time? Should we be the ones to do it? Sometimes it's a great strategy, especially if you can outsource the work, right? If you can hire somebody else to actually do it, it might be worth it. All questions that you, your staff, and your board should think about before you actually engage in those type of activities. The last question you'd want to think about is it worth it? Like, should we focus on this? Should we focus on grant writing? Does it match the strategic plan? Is it putting us further down the path that we were going on automatically? Or, does it take us back a couple notches, right? These are, again, all questions that you want to ask yourself before you engage in an earned income strategy. So you might be wondering, what type of earned income strategies can we do? As mentoring programs, most of us in here, you might not know what an earned income strategy could look like for your organization that still matches and corresponds with your mission. So these are 4 examples that are happening around the country right now. The first is called the Old School Cafe. This is a nonprofit that's based in San Francisco. And their goal is to serve at-risk youth. On the front end, they're running a restaurant. On the back end, they're teaching youth in the community how to run an organization, how to train. They're training and teaching young people how to run a restaurant. So they're getting real work experience. They're getting hands-on training, and they're the ones that's actually running the restaurant. So it's a training ground, similar to what you might see at, similar to what you might see at, well, this is what they say anyway, at Girl Scouts. They say, hey, we're teaching young girls the business principles of selling when we get you to buy these cookies. That's what they say. That's part of their strategy, right? We also have an organization called Wonder Dogs. Now, Wonder Dogs is the organization out of Atlanta. And I don't know if they're still doing this, but when I first met their executive director out there, they were rescuing abused animals, and they were building dog houses. They were building shelters for these animals. And when a person would come to adopt one of these rehabilitated dogs that they rescued, they would also sell dog houses. They would sell, dog toys. They would sell dog food, all of these things. And for them, it helped the young people develop construction skills because they're building the dog houses. It helped them with painting, selling, communication skills. I mean, it was a whole robust program, but it also earned them a lot of money. It was a great strategy. I don't know if they still do it, but it's an earned income strategy for them. Then you also, I don't know if they have them up north, but in the South here, Goodwills are pretty popular. Of course, it's a thrift store where the majority of everything in their store has been donated. And then they sell those donated items. Well, our Goodwill down here, and again, I don't know if it's like that everywhere, but our Goodwill actually finds and gives jobs to individuals that are differently abled. So, people that are on the spectrum, people that might be, on SSI, or just people who have, who can't work like a full-time job, and maybe they have some health conditions that require them to need more breaks, can't stand for a long period of time. They might have, Tourette's or whatever the case is. Our Goodwill hires these individuals, and that's what they're doing. They're giving these sometimes young people, sometimes more seasoned people, a way to earn a livable wage. And they're doing it because people are donating items. So they're able to sell these items and provide job training and all kinds of things inside of the Goodwill, right? The last one, this one was a little bit unique. When I researched this one, I was like, wow, okay, this is interesting. But The Texas Tribune is actually a nonprofit media outlet. And what they do is they charge people to read their news. So they have a newsletter that they charge a subscription price for, and that's how they sustain their organization. They also they also have a building that they rent out for fundraisers. They rent out for trainings. It's a building that they work out of. So they eventually turn it into an event space. So that's another way that they've earned income from something that they have within their wheelhouse. So these are all 4 examples of earned income for some mentoring programs. You might have seen screen printing shops where you're teaching young people how to design shirts and print shirts, and then you're selling those shirts. It really, there are a lot of ways that you can earn income and sustain your organization, again, beyond individual giving, beyond corporate grants, beyond foundation grants. So earned income is a great way. So if you're not doing or not thinking about an earned income strategy, here are a couple of examples, and you might be able to look into that, right? So a couple more examples. So we talked about fee for service. We talked about event spaces. Selling proprietary products or services. So listen, some of you guys are experts at what you do. And I would encourage you to stop giving it away for free, right? When the school calls you and says, hey, I heard you have a great mentoring program. I would love for you to come into the school and show our teachers how you help work with young people. That sounds like a training or a workshop in classroom facilitation. Charge somebody for that. That's your expertise. Listen, lived experience comes at a premium. We just have to realize that about ourselves, okay? Become a consultant. Offer training classes. Sell branded merchandise. I remember when Lance Armstrong was doing his thing, how many of you guys bought a wristband? How many of you guys was walking around? You probably hadn't rode a bike in decades, but you had one of those orange wristbands that said "Live Strong" on it. And you probably only paid $1 for it, but you had one. Well, $1 times 1 billion people is a lot of money. It was a low-cost product, and you were buying into a story, right? You were buying into a theme, and it only cost you $1, but you felt like you were a part of something. Susan G. Komen is the same way. When it's their time of year and those pink ribbons start to fly and those flags and that merchandise starts to put on the shelves, everybody wants to be a part of that, right? You have the ability to do that yourself for your organization. Some of you guys are running mentoring programs that could be easily a summer camp. It could easily be a leadership training opportunity for the community. Like there are so many ways, right? We just have to be creative. Yes, Jeanette, and these are unrestricted dollars. Unrestricted, because you can write grants all day, but if you've ever received one, you'll see this grant is for this specific thing. This grant is only good for this. And oh, by the way, send me all your receipts. And oh, by the way, I need to have 17 meetings with you before I give you the check. And oh, by the way, you're only going to get half the check up front, even though you've already done listen, I'm telling you, there are so many other ways to fund our organizations. A lot of times it just requires a little bit of creativity, and more importantly, it requires a little bit of audacity on our side, because we have the tools, we have the resources, we have the expertise. We just have to believe in it ourselves, put a dollar amount to it, and add tax, right? That's what we got to do. Okay. Any questions on that before I go into the next section? Give everyone a moment. No questions. Awesome. The next thing I want to share with you is endowed funds. So an endowment is a type of funding mechanism that you'll see, in the top right-hand corner, we actually have it listed as for mature organizations. This is the type of funding mechanism that a lot of mature organizations engage in. You're going to see an endowment from hospitals, museums, universities, large churches. An endowment is essentially an investment that's put into the market, and based off of how the market performs, there is an amount of money that you're able to pull off of that endowment. It's usually 4 to 5% that you're then able to take and use, and it would be an unrestricted amount of money for you to use. Now, most endowments take at least $10,000 to $25,000 or more just to start. This is why we say it's one of those strategies that we like to reserve for the mature organizations, because if we're being honest with ourselves, if you're a grassroots or a growing organization, you probably don't have an additional $50,000 to put aside, because once you do that, like, you can't touch that principal anymore. The only thing that you can do is use the money that is returned, up to that 4 to 5%. So how an endowment works is, let's say a donor says, you know what, I want to make a donation to this nonprofit, but I want to do it as an endowment. That money is given to, say, an organization like Fidelity, or in our case, where I work at a community foundation where the majority of our funds come from endowments. It's given to a community foundation to invest essentially in the stock market. And based off of how that performs, you're able to use 4 to 5% of the interest income from that original endowment. When that money comes back to the nonprofit, it comes back in the form of an unrestricted gift, right? And then you're able to use it however you want. One of the most familiar ways that endowment works, if you guys are familiar with universities, especially HBCUs, we always talk about, if you went to a HBCU, let's donate back to the HBCUs so that they can get their endowments up. But the endowments are restricted pools of money that allows them to offer scholarships to students. It allows them to beautify the campus. It allows them to do a host of things that their federal funding and grant funding won't allow them to do. So that's like the most common example of what an endowment is and how it looks. We encourage all organizations, once you get to a certain level, to invest in an endowment, because when you do that, it actually takes the pressure off of your fundraising, right? If you've established an endowment and you're growing it every single year, and you know that a certain amount of money peels off from that every single year, that's less money that you have to fundraise. That's guaranteed income. Like, once the endowment is established, you can't touch the principal amount of money. The only thing that you can touch is the percent over the income that's earned. So that money is pretty much there in perpetuity. So if your organization is thinking long-term, let's say you've already been around for 10, 20 years and you want to be around for another 10, 20 more, creating an endowment is a great way to make sure that your organization is there for the long haul, right? So I do encourage you, if you're on that level, to start thinking about what that would look like for you, what it would look like for your organization. And I know here in South Carolina, one of the things that we've been talking about as a community is establishing an endowment for all mentoring organizations in our city, right? How great would it be if an endowment was established in the state of Maryland for every single mentoring organization, where you guys created events and created fundraisers to grow this endowment, and it was a fund specifically geared towards mentoring programs, where you didn't have to go anywhere else. You had a fund set aside just for you, right? That, again, it's another conversation of collaboration, not just with your organizations, but with the state, right? So now everybody is working towards a common goal. Could you imagine having an endowment of a couple $1 million where every single year, you know, automatically your organization is going to get a check. That's what an endowment can do for you if it's done the right way. So I encourage you to look at endowments as a way to, again, grow your bottom line. Okay. Planned giving. Yes, Dayon, let's talk to Wes more. Wes is the guy. He could probably do it for you. He could probably talk about it. And I'll also say this. So, you know, thinking about not just Wes, but I know in Virginia, right? The mentor affiliate in Virginia out there with Chad Butt is the executive director of that affiliate. They have worked with their governor to create a line item in the governor's budget for mentoring organizations. So again, there are examples and opportunities all around the country where organizations can get together and create something magical, right? It really takes effort, it takes time, and more importantly, it takes collaboration on your part, right? Plan giving. Also for the mature organizations, plan giving is exactly what it sounds like. It's giving plans for the period of time where you're no longer going to be here. It's also referred to as legacy giving. In a nutshell, it's giving the donor's intent after they're gone, right? It could be cash, it could be real estate, it could be insurance, it could be equity. The most popular types of plan giving, the first are bequests. Bequests, again, are large amounts of cash that are given once a potential donor is gone. You also have retained life assets. So again, when a potential donor is gone, they can donate part of their estate to an organization. Life insurance, that feels like it's kind of self-explanatory. If a donor has been giving to you in a long time, or either you're doing some work that they are particularly fond of and want to see the work continue, sometimes you can encourage them to put you into the will, put you as a part of the life insurance. Personal property, donors can also give artwork, collectibles, books, equipment. I've seen boats, I've seen houses. There are a number of things that people can donate in their passing in order to keep a mission that they care about going. If you don't have someone on your team who is experienced in this area, you know, that might be somebody that you want to engage, because it's a sensitive subject. You know, it's talking to someone about what they're going to do when they're no longer here. And it's not about what are you going to do whenever you die. It's more about how can we keep your legacy going? How can we create a you know, an environment of continuous giving while you're still here, right? So planned giving is a way that you can do that. So I'm going to run through this really quick because I know we're running out of time. When we talk about business models, you know, the difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit organization is that a for-profit business, they have a particular solution for an intended audience, and that relationship is formed where they have a customer, right? And the customer is really paying for the value of whatever the product is. So their business model, as you can see at the bottom of the screen for our Walmart people, Walmart's business model is, we're going to sell you whatever you need for the lowest cost possible. So they're always going to beat everybody's costs. They're a low cost provider. Facebook is what's called a fast follower, meaning they're going to wait for somebody to come up with a really good product, and then they're going to steal it. And then they're going to try to, you know, put it out there and make tweaks on it and make it their own. But they're not spending money in the research and all that kind of stuff. They're letting other organizations do that. Right. So those are business models for-profit businesses. Nonprofit organizations, they don't have the same thing. Our beneficiaries are not always the customer, right? So when a nonprofit finds a way to create value for our customers or for our beneficiaries, they're the people who receive our services aren't always the people who are paying for our services. right? So that's just something that we have to keep in our mind. So 2 funding models for a nonprofit organization. The first is called the member motivator. Now I have the Alpha Phi Alpha symbol up there, but essentially individuals who believe that there is a collective good, they don't mind paying into that, like a fraternity or a sorority. You also have organizations like Teach for America, where their whole mission is to they focus on issues like poor schools and poor children, but they do so talking about teachers. They're what's called a local nationalizer, which means they're talking about a national issue that affects everybody, but they're doing so in a way that promotes their individual solution, right? So Teach for America, they believe that they can address poor schools and children in need of adult role models by training quality teachers, right? So as mentoring programs, we have to think about what our funding model is, in addition to diversifying the stream of income that we have. Does that make sense? Just give me a thumbs up if that made sense, because I know I ran through that part really, really fast. Okay, they see some thumbs up, Jeanette. Thank you for that. Thumbs up. Oh, Tori, you got a whole group of people over there. Boy, Tori got a crew. All right. Thank you for that thumbs up. So I encourage you to think about your funding model. A great article out there that talks about funding models is from Bridgespan. If you Google nonprofit funding models from Bridgespan, you'll actually come up with about 10 different funding models. And I encourage you to look at that article and match up with what you do as an organization with one of those funding models, and then see how it stacks up and see what tweaks and changes that you might need to make, for your organization. Okay. In closing, when nonprofits and funding sources are not well matched, money does not flow to the areas where it will do the greatest good. Again, we talked about individual giving, we talked about corporate and foundation grants, we talked about earned revenue, we talked about endowments, planned giving in a business model versus a funding model. Those are all the things that we talked about today. You might be asking to yourself, what are the next steps? Well, listen, I'm gonna be honest with you. The next steps are really, really simple. The first is just take a deep breath. I gave you guys a lot of information really, really fast. And some of it you might have been hearing for the first time. Some of it you may have heard before. But the first thing that I would always encourage you to do is just realize that we all started where you were. Some of us are still where you are. Some of us are a little bit ahead of you. Some of us are a little bit behind you, but we're all on this journey together. So I would assess where you are as an organization. Are you a grassroots? Are you growing? Are you in the incubation stage? Are you a more mature organization? I would take inventory of where you are, the resources that you have access to, the skills that you have available. And if you have a strategic plan, let's review those, right? Let's dust those off. I'm sure they're on a shelf somewhere. You probably did it about 3 or 4 years ago and never looked at it again. But let's pull those out. Let's see where we're headed and where we can incorporate some of these the diversity strategies into your fundraising to be more sustainable. And listen, when in doubt, streamline, right? Less is more. It's better to go an inch wide and a mile deep versus a mile wide and an inch deep. We want you to do things with fidelity. We want you to do things with intention. And sometimes that means doing less until you can do more, right? So I encourage you guys all to do that. Any questions? Any questions? Anything I can clarify? We've already established you will have all of these slides in your inbox. I believe this is being recorded, so you will also get the recording. I believe it's going to be uploaded to the YouTube channel.
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. So that takes off like 3 or 4 questions right there. Okay.
Yes. We will forward the slides to you when it is uploaded. So we'll also send the link to the YouTube. And here's Sam's information. So you're able to follow up with Sam if you do have questions. And yes, if you're looking for technical assistance, this is something we offer year round, but Sam is one of our consultants. So if you are looking to work with Sam, put in your request and mention Sam Bellamy sent you.
There is my
Match with Sam.
information.
Many clients have worked with Sam, and many of our other consultants are actually on this call. You might see them in the chat. Jeff, I saw Linda and Jeanette. We have a great crew that are here to offer you great knowledge and experience, like we've seen on the call today here with Sam. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Sam, for giving us this amazing information. There's so much to meet for everyone to go and like do research and
Mhm.
take back to their teams and things like that. So that's really exciting. And Sam, did you have a feedback link you wanted to drop?
I did. I was going to say, before you disappear, if you can help me out, if you will scan this QR code and give me your feedback, like real time. I have my phone right here. All of your feedback comes directly to me. I would love to know what went well, what can be improved, how can I make this better, more efficient? What resources do you wish you had more? What do you wish I mentioned that I didn't? This really helps me out, helps me get better. Also, my links are at the bottom if you want to stay in touch, LinkedIn, Facebook, email, whatever you need. I am here to answer any of your questions. Did Serenity just draw on my screen?
And when we close as well, the mentor feedback survey will pop up as well. So let us
Mhm.
know what future topics you'd like to know. If you want Sam to come back, let us know. And we appreciate you all so much. Thank you for joining us. We
Indeed.
have another training next week about cultural humility. I'll send that registration link out in the follow-up as well. So we hope to see you again soon. Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you guys so much. You have a good one.
Yeah, have a good night. Have a good weekend. Bye, y'all.